From ABC News Headquarters in New York, I'm Frank Reynolds. Howard K. Smith is on vacation. These are tonight's headlines. Arab terrorists still hold approximately 200 hostages on those two airliners hijacked to Jordan. One guerrilla spokesman reportedly demands freedom for Sirhan Sirhan, the assassin of Robert Kennedy. Diplomats from the countries involved in the latest skyjackings confer with the State Department on what can be done, and the international airlines and pilots consider what action they can take to save lives and property. Reports tonight from Arnold Collins on the destruction of the Pan Am 747 in Cairo, Peter Jennings on the arrival in Rome of the Pan Am passengers, Dick Shoemaker on Governor Reagan and the alleged demand for the release of Sirhan Sirhan, Jules Bergman on the dilemma of the international airlines, Don North on the funeral of Vince Lombardi, and tonight's comment on hijackers, their havens, and international law. Details on these and other stories in a moment.
Now let's get this straight, sir. You are an elf, right?
No, I'm a Keebler. There's a difference.
In what way?
Well, now you take your average ordinary elf. He lollygags around your bosky dell, your sylvan glade, places like that. He's not an achiever.
Whereas you Keeblers...
Big cookies, sir. Like these Keebler pecan sandies.
I thought they came from a big factory.
Many people think that, but it's all done back there in the hollow tree.
Really?
9 to 5 daily. Taste that.
All right.
Keebler pecan sandies. Look at the pecans in there. Would a big unfeeling factory be that generous? And the flavor, that comes from your fine, wholesome ingredients, plus the skill of tiny elfin hands.
I believe you.
A lot of people don't. They don't believe in elves.
You're kidding.
Get this. They believe in factories.
Keebler pecan sandies. Uncommonly good, wherever they come from.
This is the hijacking situation as of now. Of the approximately 600 persons who were endangered in the 4 separate hijackings yesterday, approximately 200 are still in jeopardy. They are the male passengers aboard a TWA 707 and a SwissAir DC-8, both now parked on a desert landing strip some 13 miles from Amman, Jordan. This afternoon, the Palestine commandos responsible for all the hijackings released about 100 women, children, and elderly persons from the two planes. The freed passengers were taken to a hotel in Amman. The commandos have stacked explosives aboard both planes, still containing the male passengers, and threatened to blow up the aircraft if their demands for the release of other commandos imprisoned in Britain, Switzerland, and West Germany are not met by their deadline, which is 10 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday. Switzerland and West Germany already have agreed to the commando ultimatum, and Prime Minister Heath of Great Britain has called in key ministers of his cabinet to discuss the demand that Britain release the girl who tried to hijack an El Al plane yesterday. So far, only one life has been lost, the Guerrilla, who tried with the girl and failed to hijack the El Al flight. One aircraft has been completely destroyed, a Pan American jumbo jet that the commandos blew up on the ground in Cairo. Here is a report on that from ABC's Arnold Collins in Cairo.
The plane is now on fire, and there is a huge black ball of smoke, a great column of black oily smoke going up into the sky. 4 explosions have been heard on board that plane. First gunshots, sporadic gunfiring, and then 4 great explosions. The first one of them, I saw it come up like a huge great ball of fire.
Passengers said it was a miracle that they got out alive. They said the hijackers hadn't given them much time. In the dark, some stumbled out into the desert as they ran from the shots and explosions. Later, most of them were quite composed. They even seemed to be enjoying themselves. Most of their injuries, no more serious than scraped knees. The hijackers who brought them on their dangerous flight to Cairo did not seem to be enjoying themselves. The 3 young Palestinians were arrested and held for questioning. Outside, the plane continued to burn and smolder. In landing successfully, it had been the first jumbo jet to visit Cairo. This is Arnold Collins, ABC News, at the Cairo International Airport.
It was a mixed group of people which arrived at Rome Airport. The younger ones seemed to have recovered from their ordeal, while the older people were still showing the strain. Officials here stood by with wheelchairs and ambulances. There were some who needed them. having injured themselves trying to escape from the plane moments before it exploded. None of the passengers had any shoes. Those, along with their baggage, were destroyed. Most of the people we talked to were impressed by the commandos' efficiency and calmness. One of them was Jim Gould from Belleville, Illinois, who had been on holiday with his wife.
The commandos were very calm, cool, and collected. It was reassuring to me and to the other passengers also to note that they were not the wild-eyed fanatics that we sometimes hear about hijacking aircraft. They were rational and appeared to have definite goals in mind.
Everybody knew exactly what to do, so it was very calm, and everybody was sitting down. We were passing out chocolates and trying to keep everybody calm. When we landed, we were at the end of the runway, and they moved us in not too far, and they tried to stop us. And there was confusion between the cockpit. There was one hijacker in the cockpit and two of them downstairs, and there was confusion between them what to do. And we knew that we were supposed to open the doors and get them out. We only had we had 8 minutes. Well, they told us we had 8 minutes. So when the airplane was rolling slightly, and we opened the doors, but we realized we couldn't put people out. So the flight director went upstairs, and he said, shut the engines, and hijacker upstairs got upset, and he said they told us downstairs, so he did, and they stopped. And we started the people going out, and it was, I would say it was about a minute and a half before everybody was out, and, I'd say 100 yards away. And then, as I was going out, there was one girl in back of me, and the cockpit in back of me, and we went out, and we just started running and running and running. And we ran, I wasn't very far when the first explosion came, and it was the cockpit in the lounge area. And I'll never forget turning around and looking at the airplane, and the landing lights and everything were on, the doors were open, the chutes were out, and the cockpit was on fire, the whole lounge area. But then I turned around and ran, and I never saw the rest of the plane blow. It all did. And when we saw it later, there was nothing left of the aircraft except the tail.
After an airport meal, a supply of slippers and shaving gear, most of the passengers headed on to their final destination on other aircraft that were closely checked before departing. Peter Jennings, ABC News, Rome.
The Arab commandos are also demanding the release of an unspecified number of guerrillas now held in Israeli prisons. An Israeli official in Paris has said his country will never negotiate with the commandos about hijacked passengers. It is believed there are 56 Israelis aboard the two planes still in Arab hands in Jordan. The one hijacking that failed yesterday involved an El Al flight from Amsterdam to New York. The two would-be hijackers were subdued, one was killed, and the plane landed at London before continuing on to New York. ABC's David Snell was at Kennedy Airport when the passengers finally reached their destination early this morning.
12 hours after the scheduled arrival in New York, the tearful reunions. Friends and loved ones at Kennedy Airport in the middle of the night to give welcome and to hear firsthand what had happened.
The guy had two pistols, and they wanted to go in, to the pilot. They wouldn't let him. And the way you see an Israeli fella, a thin one, you wouldn't think the sea could pick up his hand. So he went in, you see, he gave her a shot that she stretched out, and one man helped him, and he got, you see, a big cut in his forehead. And then you see the shoot 3 times. If this, you see what happened on the top, we all will be dead. So they shot him, and they took her away, you see, and one steward was shot, injured, you see, on the chest.
The stewardesses and the stewards went through the aisle saying everything's okay. They started singing songs, clapping hands, making everybody feel secure that everything was okay. And we, it was tension was going on. However, we all said our prayers, and we're Jewish peoples flying on the Israel Airlines, and we knew nothing could go wrong, nothing possibly could. God flies with our plane, and everything was okay.
Everyone who has to do with air traffic has to do something about it. You're 33,000 feet in the air. I mean, and 100 lives can be snuffed out. Innocent lives. I mean, it's one thing if you're fighting your enemy, if you choose to fight your enemy, but to destroy innocent lives. I mean, this is going back to the Middle Ages.
For most who had waited through the night, thoughts of the future were overcome by relief. The events of the day were past. The ordeal over. David Snell, ABC News, New York.
There was one other comment on the attempted hijack of the El Al plane that may bear repeating. It came from a spokesman for the Palestinian guerrillas who explained over Radio Damascus But they failed in their hijack attempt because Israel puts armed guards aboard the El Al planes, and this, said the Guerrilla spokesman, is a gross violation of international law.
NFL football goes nighttime. Teams in the newly combined AFL-NFL National Football League will be playing regularly scheduled games every Monday night. NFL Monday Night Football on ABC.
The Jets versus the Browns, September 21st.
All day long, there have been reports attributed only to guerrilla spokesmen in Beirut that the hijackers were also demanding the release of Sirhan Sirhan, the convicted killer of Senator Robert Kennedy. State Department officials say flatly that no such demand has been made by the commandos who hold the two planes in Jordan. True or not, the report from Beirut adds an even more bizarre note to this already incredible story. ABC's Dick Shoemaker has a report from Los Angeles.
Reporters reaching the Sirhan home this morning found Mrs. Sirhan unavailable. According to friends, she was flustered by news of the ransom demands. Reportedly, she said, "I don't want anything to happen to those hostages." Mrs. Sirhan still believes the courts will let her son out of prison. Meanwhile, the one man who has the power to free Sirhan now, Governor Ronald Reagan, was asked if he had talked to President Nixon about the Arab demands.
We're in contact with the State Department. They are in receipt of a note, but so far have revealed no details of that note, so we know nothing more than that. And we are keeping in touch, and they, of course, will keep us informed.
Governor Reagan was asked, is he considering releasing Sirhan in exchange for the hostages now held by the Arab terrorists?
Well, my first reaction is, in this kind of a world where these things are going on, and we have seen these attempts before, that it's like any ordinary blackmail with that kind of person. The first payment only leads you to many others. This goes back as far as Thomas Jefferson, who said that the first insult unanswered is parent to many others.
Governor Reagan indicated he was morally opposed to releasing Sirhan as long as it was coupled with the threat of international blackmail. Dick Shoemaker, ABC News, Los Angeles.
The fact that citizens of the United States and at least 4 other countries are held hostage aboard those 2 planes hijacked in Jordan poses a diplomatic dilemma. In Washington today, representatives of the various countries involved met with the State Department. ABC's Joseph C. Harsh reports from Washington.
The State Department set up an emergency task force here this morning to do what it could for the safety of the people on board the 2 hijacked airliners. Secretary of State Rogers himself came straight here on his return to Washington. He was joined for a half-hour consultation by representatives of Britain, West Germany, Switzerland, and Israel. The meeting was an exchange of information among the 5. There was, of course, little that could be done from here. The usual talk about alerting the 6th Fleet or the 82nd Airborne Division was quickly pushed aside because American military action would be of no use with the guerrillas actually surrounding the 2 planes. Of course, this sort of thing happened once before this year, and it can happen again so long as the Middle East war goes on. The episode is really just one more reason why the Nixon administration will do all it can to get an end to that war. Joseph C. Harsh at the State Department.
In today's comment about the hijackings from the White House, President Nixon's press secretary said, "We are doing all in our power to bring about the release of the passengers and aircraft."
I'm a waitress, chef, chauffeur, teacher, lover, nurse. I'm a housewife, and I love it. I love what I do because I take good care of myself. I exercise, get plenty of rest, try to watch my diet. And to make sure I get enough vitamins and iron, I start every morning with a Geritol tablet. Geritol is one of the nice things I do for myself. And with all my jobs, I need all the help I can get.
Geritol, one of the good things you can do for yourself.
Lainey Kazan.
I get a warm romantic notion when you use aqua velvet lotion. That's how our romance began, because there's something about an aqua velvet man.
Men, put it on. Aqua velvet with your mitt. So good for your face and all that manly fragrance. Aqua velvet. Put it on.
Dan August, starring Burt Reynolds as a young police officer. Matt Lincoln, starring Vince Edwards.
Practicing community psychiatry, going to the people who need us without waiting for them to come to our office to find us, by going out into the world where they are.
The Most Deadly Game, starring George Maharis, Yvette Mimieux, Ralph Bellamy. The 3 best ways to solve a crime.
From time to time, there are reports of new measures and devices for preventing would-be hijackers from getting on board airplanes. But yesterday's multiple piracy in the air shows that either they're not in use at all airports or they are far from foolproof. A report now on what some of the major airline executives are saying from ABC science editor Jules Bergman.
The world's major airlines are tormented and confused as to how to handle future hijackings, except for one key fact. It wouldn't have prevented any of the current hijackings since the Pan Am, TWA, SwissAir, and El Al jets were all bound for New York. As for putting armed guards or security men on board the jets, Najib Halaby and F.C. Weiser, the presidents of Pan Am and TWA, both told me today they've flatly ruled out any such move. They point out that no U.S. citizen has been killed or even seriously injured in any of the Arab hijackings. They feel that El Al, the Israeli airline, has been extraordinarily lucky in not losing a plane load of passengers in the shootouts their security men have had with the terrorists. Nearly $40 million worth of jets have been lost, including the $23 million 747. But the planes were insured and are replaceable. It's the human lives that count, and that's all, President Weiser of TWA declares. Nothing short of searching every passenger and all baggage can totally prevent future hijackings. Gun detectors lessen the risk, but they aren't foolproof. And the jumbo jets, with hundreds of people boarding them in a few minutes, make the problem much tougher. In London, ABC's Howard Tuckner talked with Captain O. Jackson, Executive Secretary of the International Airline Pilots Association.
The situation has been intensifying and worsening in the Middle East, and inputs from members intimately concerned flying in the area do point in the direction that this may now be unsafe for us to fly, either from our point of view or from those of our passengers.
So what you're saying is it's possible that if your group decides that it's unsafe, you may not fly into these areas?
Indeed, it's the duty of the pilot to maintain safety standards, and whether these are due to deficiencies in airport technicalities or to insecurity, bombs on board and sabotage at an airport, or to en route risks such as hijacking. In each of those cases, it's his job to maintain a reasonable level of safety. Where do we draw the line? Is the Middle East at explosive point? Ought we to be there with a couple of hundred passengers strapped to the pilot's back? I think the answer tomorrow might well be no, but I am not able to anticipate what my governing body and their immediate advisors will in fact say. But these are suggestions that have already been made by cable.
Captain Jackson's group will meet tomorrow in London to discuss proposals for preventing hijacking. Yesterday's hijackings and the subsequent developments today have all but overshadowed other news in the Middle East. But today, fighting broke out again in the streets of Amman and its suburbs, with Palestine commandos and Jordanian security troops shooting at each other. The Jordanian government also revealed that an American sergeant on the staff of the U.S. Embassy was kidnapped on Saturday by guerrillas. And on this 32nd day of the ceasefire, Israel filed its 11th complaint of Egyptian violations along the Suez.
We got a lot to share.
Scoey Mitchell and Tracy Reed are newlyweds. They are adjusting to their new state of matrimony.
So I've got a great dinner for you. It's the same kind the airlines use.
Must be an unscheduled airline.
This is Tony Randall as Felix. This is Jack Klugman as Oscar. They are also trying to adjust.
You never liked Albert, did you?
What's the life? From the day he arrived, he took over our house. You put the evening paper in his cage before I get at it. You ever try reading a paper after parents been at it?
Barefoot in the Park and The Odd Couple premieres Thursday, September 24th, here on ABC.
This fall on ABC.
In other news, Martha Mitchell, the wife of the Attorney General, has had more quotable comments to make. She said, "The Vietnam War stinks. If it weren't for Senator Fulbright, we would have been out of it 16 months ago." End quote. Mrs. Mitchell made those remarks aboard Air Force One during the flight last night back to Washington. The Attorney General, also on the plane, was asked if he would like to know what his wife had said, and he replied, "Heavens no, I might jump out the window." Emergency regulations to control the sale and handling of explosives go into effect tomorrow in Minnesota, a result of 8 bombing incidents there over the past 3 weeks. The new emergency laws will require positive identification of all buyers of high explosives and a 24-hour waiting period between purchase and delivery. President Nixon observes Labor Day with a dinner for labor leaders and their families tonight at the White House. Afterwards, the guests will view a torchlight military review on the White House South Lawn. Memorial services were held in New York City and in Washington today for Vince Lombardi, the late coach of the Green Bay Packers and Washington Redskins. President Nixon was among the mourners at today's service in Washington's St. Matthew's Cathedral. A report on the funeral mass in New York now from ABC's Don North.
The 3,000 seats in St. Patrick's Cathedral were filled to capacity as mourners from all walks of life came to pay their last respects. Both the Washington Redskins and Green Bay Packers teams, men goaded to football victories in the 11 years Lombardi coached them, filed solemnly into the cathedral. Honorary pallbearers included Bart Starr and Paul Hornung of the Packers. White House Counselor Robert Finch represented President Nixon. New York Mayor John Lindsay and Ethel Kennedy were also present. Cardinal Terence Cook paid the final tribute to his personal friend, Vince Lombardi.
Vince Lombardi fought the good fight. He has finished the course. He has kept the faith. We believe in that last struggle with death, this man won the final victory, and he will be praying for all of us in heaven.
Coach Lombardi had become a symbol of discipline and dedication. His influence went far beyond the world of sports. In a final tribute today, in the Requiem Mass, Cardinal Terence Cook said, "Vince Lombardi is a symbol and inspiration to all Americans faced with the challenge of the 1970s. Don North, ABC News, St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York.
I'll be back in a moment.
Hi, folks. I'm Rex Allen. I've been behind the scenes for several years now talking to you about Purina Dog Chow. But this time, the Purina people have given me the opportunity to step out front with some really good news. You know, you folks have been mighty good to us. You've made Purina Dog Chow the biggest selling dog food in the country, almost from the very beginning. It finally got to where so many of you were buying so much, there wasn't enough to go around. Well, it's taken us a while to catch up. But now we've built 2 more factories, and it looks like there's going to be plenty. So we'd like to make it up to you. For when there wasn't, We'd like you to have your first pound free. Now, if you'll just send us a weight circle from a Purina Dog Chow package, we'll take care of everything. And in the meantime, take a look around your grocery store. Purina Dog Chow is back.
Yesterday's hijackings and today's subsequent blackmail have not yet resulted in the ultimate nightmare, the large-scale destruction of life that becomes so frightful a possibility the instant a hijacker makes his move. But it almost happened aboard the El Al flight from Amsterdam. Shots were fired in the cabin, and apparently the pin on a grenade actually had been pulled. Somehow it's difficult to believe that this sort of crime would be so potent a political weapon and so popular, if that is the right word, a form of terror, if the first hijacker to land in Havana years ago had been immediately clapped into irons and shipped right back to the United States to face trial as a criminal. In recent years, the Castro government has given hijackers good reason to regret their crime by making life miserable for them in Cuba. But in the early days of the plague, they were received as sort of jet-age Robin Hoods, and to a certain extent that mistaken attitude still prevails today in other countries. But the gangsters who coordinated the weekend terror in the skies belong to no country. However, they successfully defy the authority of the countries in which they live. Consider the steady stream of demands and deadlines that came yesterday and today from Arab guerrilla spokesmen in Amman and Beirut. Openly claiming responsibility for the hijackings, they continued to issue press releases and statements, and obviously they have no fear that anybody in the governments of Jordan or Lebanon will make any move against them. It is as though a self-proclaimed kidnapping ring in this country set up its headquarters across the street from the FBI to issue pronouncements and make threats. Such a thing is unthinkable here, but not in Lebanon or in Jordan, where presumably these crimes were planned. Interference in the internal affairs of another country is contrary to all the rules of international relations, but these guerrillas are not playing according to any rules, and if the governments of Lebanon and Jordan are unable to keep them from endangering the lives of citizens of other countries, perhaps the other countries eventually will have to take action on their own. That's tonight's news and a comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.
Get in on the fun every week for the Bill Anderson Show. If you'd like to see the show in person here at WSIX, call 255-5431 for reservations.
Watch the ABC program Now. Tonight, the program will feature Jules Bergman, our science editor, and he will explore the problem of noise pollution. Now on ABC Tonight. This has been a presentation of ABC News. Don't miss the exciting Stanford-Arkansas game as they clash head-on when NCAA football launches another great football season. Saturday evening at 6 o'clock, 5 Central Time, here on ABC.